We'll jump into the next discussion item. Mayor had asked last week that we put back on the deck and provide maybe just a little more discussion and direction related to the potential cell phone or texting while driving restrictions. So we have that on today. I think from a staff perspective, what we would suggest, we would draft an ordinance that you have reviewed. The last time this was discussed, it was told to send that ordinance back to the traffic commission, which is absolutely the appropriate body, and to have them conduct a series of 2 public hearings on that ordinance. I think based on just everything else that we're learning and we're hearing, we might suggest that we broaden that up a little bit. I don't think that this is an item that we can necessarily debate or solve here at this table. I don't think that it's most appropriate for them. We have Mr. Downey here with us today representing the Traffic Commission. Of course, the new city traffic engineer, Mr. Byrd, and Mr. Michael Rice. Michael and Jerry are the staff support to that Traffic Commission. I think as they look at this, some of the suggestions that we've had, they might want to expand that discussion to include certainly the ordinance as it was drafted. Recall that ordinance is drafted with the instruction of take it about as tight and as restrictive as you can get it, and let's see where it works its way out. I think to do that, we need to look at, they need to look at the existing cell phone and texting laws, probably on a state or federal level, state and federal level. The studies that are available on distracted driving, and I think we're learning that that's probably the correct term, distracted driving. The various statistical literature that's available that talks about the effectiveness or alternatively maybe not quite the effectiveness of these restrictions. I picked one out that I've actually used for years thinking it was going to happen and never has, and that's, what is the state going to do? I really thought as we headed into the 2011 legislative session that the state of Texas was going to fix it. And of course there was a bill that was ultimately vetoed, so obviously that didn't fix it. Related to that, I think it's important that we keep on the table though that in Texas you do already have these restrictions. Certainly in school zones as a local option, but on all, quote, young drivers as a condition of their provisional license. I think if we tie that together, of course provide again the support for Amarillo's law enforcement and our city legal staff, if they're able to grab all of that and pull that together and conduct those hearings, and ultimately come back to this body with a recommendation that would be effective and would be plausible, and ultimately would increase public safety, which is the goal of the discussion. So with that, I can kind of hush up.
I think what we discovered last week of study is that a lot of this information is counterintuitive. It takes some study to figure out what you're really doing. And it surprised me. I mean, it just surprised me at what I don't want to draw any conclusion for the traffic committee, but I think their job is to study this and see what effect it really has, and to see if we really can affect this in a positive way or not. Because there's some pretty counterintuitive things in here.
This Highway Loss Data Institute bulletin was something.
You did?
Yeah, but they even say that they,
It shocked me.
It is a shocker. When you get down, drill down to why accident rates go up after people pass this, without reading the conclusive part of the discussion, we just read the stats, you and I talked about it here, and I bounced it off about 6 people. Everybody came up with the same idea that then they said in the study was people begin to hide while texting. The other thing that I think feeds into that they need to look at is the stats show that it's mostly over 25-year-olds that cause the numbers to go up. The younger people seem to know how to hide it and do it because they do it all through school. But it's over 25-year-olds. The other thing I think leads into that is that when I send a text, I want to put commas in, I want to do it properly, and they can care less. And so they just type in some things and send it, and I'm sitting there trying to figure it out if I'm over 25 and do it properly, what I think is proper. There's a lot of counterintuitive. There's not a simple answer to this. You can't, I mean, it's pretty darn interesting. So I think your task is to study see, because
I was so disappointed by the results they got that I went and looked up who these people were because I didn't trust them. But they're legitimate.
they're legitimate.
Yeah. I was like, this
You
could
know,
be wrong.
there's plenty of other data that suggests that too. We each got a letter from a lady here in town that said, study this, this, and this before you decide. And the fact is, the only one I've come up that works is this sign that was out there, and it says, honk if you love Jesus, text while driving if you want to meet him.
For the record, that did not come from my research.
That came
Well,
from my
I
research.
think that your recommendation is probably the proper course to take, and let the traffic commission
Right.
do the studying, and knows whether we need to go down that road or just go into public relations campaign to
Yep.
get people to stop doing it on their own volition without any rules and regulations. But
You know, technology will catch up with us someday, because if you think about it, if they put a device, a proximity device in the steering wheel column, then each phone has to have a recognition chip. If it's in there, it's in a certain area, it won't allow it to work. And that's what it'll come to through the NTSB, probably, recommended through this, and whether the states do it or the federal government does it. The other problem is, you see this, is there's so many different laws. As you drive through the state, you almost have to have a map saying what you can and can't do.
Well, and ultimately, we're gonna have cars that drive us where we go.
Well, this.
And that's not that far off.
No,
I
it
want a
isn't.
jetpack.
It isn't. But fixing this one will probably come from technology.
Well,
I want a jetpack.
Who was it that announced the new car that has a Facebook and Twitter?
Kia
Is
and
it Kia? The interface is built into the
Audi.
car
oh,
now?
for God's
Audi
sake.
has it. There's about 7 brands that have that now.
Can you do that while you're rolling?
I don't know. I haven't
Well,
driven one,
what the NTSB is saying is if you're over 2 miles an hour, it's got to shut off. The screen has to go blank or back to the standard equipment, like a radio or whatever. But that's all going to change in the next few years. And last night they were showing a new cell phone that was on a piece of plastic that was about half this size, and you fold that piece of plastic out and the whole cell phone lights up. They said it's about a year away.
So for clarification, you're not looking for a 1 cent recommendation past the ordinance, reject the ordinance, you're looking for
Absolutely
a
not.
comprehensive report from the traffic commission.
To study the data and see if this really has any effect or not. We don't need to pass an ordinance if it has no positive effect.
Well, I think the commissioner said it well. You know, it ranges from what you have before you as that draft ordinance. It's probably your upper limit, running through the gamut of maybe the answer is what we've tried before, and that's you've just got to make people aware and expect them to modify their own behavior, or something in between the two. So,
Well, if that's the case, I wonder if we can come back and discuss a really ongoing project on public awareness.
I think that's well within that board's purview. They do have the funding that we set aside early in December, if I recall correctly. That we did 25. So I mean, funds are there for that. I think that was kind of put on hold pending what we may or may not do with these other restrictions, but I think that entire set of ingredients is out there for them to work on and bring back to.
You know, when I was on the traffic commission, I chaired we had a subcommittee that looked at the cell phones, the texting ban, and in interest of getting the work done, you know, more rapidly, but we had a subcommittee that met often. So I guess that traffic commission could do that if they wanted to. Is it up to them how they do that?
They can. Absolutely, they can make whatever they need as far as subcommittees. Of course, there'll be some full board discussion and then the hearings. You've got an excellent group on that board. I think this is actually a pretty huge assignment for them to work on.
Yeah.
It's going to take them a bit.
There's another part of this that seemed pretty counterintuitive we might just mention, and that is that if they look at the studies about distracted driving with hands-free versus hands-on use, there's almost no difference. There's 3% difference, and those 3 to 4% difference in the distraction rate in those studies. So if you say hands-free, you got about 3% difference of using the phone. I think there's so many things here that.
It's a big issue.
Yeah.
It's obviously a safety issue, but a lot of literature starts pointing in the direction that it's distracted
Yeah.
driving rather than it's a particular.
There's also a study that says that before texting, they had about the same kind of accident rates because people tend to get distracted no matter what's there. They find something to distract themselves with driving. whether it's
You're
phones or.
snacking a seed or.
Yeah. So even if you do it, they're still distracted driving.
What I read that I didn't test, because it's probably true as it applies to me, was that an adult, not a young adult, that was trying to text would take their eyes off the road for 4.6 seconds out of every 6 seconds.
And it takes 23 seconds for the average text, so that's 3 or 4 times.
Takes
they
me
look up
longer.
and down.
Takes me longer now.
Ooh. And then if they're hiding it, so the police don't see it.
It's complicated.
Yeah, it is.
It's
So
obviously
we're-
safety concerns.
Yeah, so we're just gonna go ahead and pass it on to the traffic commission?
Thank you, Dan.
Problem?
No problem.
And Jerry, we're glad you get started with something easy and smooth.
Yeah, there's nothing emotional about this section.
Okay, well, thank you all. We will do that, and I think the next time it'll be before this body is when we start hearing either the presentations or the recommendations from the traffic commission.